You're listening to The Higher Ed Marketer, the podcast for marketing professionals in higher education. Join us every week as we talk to the industry's greatest minds in student recruitment, donor relations, marketing trends, new technologies, and much more. If you're looking for conversations centered around where marketing in higher ed is going, this podcast is for you. Let's get into the show.
Everyone, welcome to the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast. My name is Troy Singer with Ring Digital, and I'm here with my co-host, but more importantly, good friend, Bart Kaler of Kaler Solutions. And today, our topic for our discussion is turnaround leadership through mission, focus, and consistent marketing. We are talking to Dr. Amy Carey, president at Friends University. Since 2015, Amy has led Friends through a remarkable season of turnaround leadership, stabilizing finances, investing in campus renewal, and revitalizing the university's Christian mission.
Yeah, it's been really good. This is such a great conversation today. And I think you'll hear it when we talk to Amy, is the fact that she's got a career that spans like advancement, fundraising, communications, marketing. So being able to serve as a vice president of institutional advancement from University of Northwestern St. Paul, she also has been at, got her doctorate at Azusa Pacific. And so she has a great deal of understanding about the Christian university market. And I think that she also brings a wide diversity of skill sets to the role of president. And I think you'll hear that as it comes out in the conversation. Just such a fun conversation today.
A fun conversation, and at the end of it, I'm sure you'll agree with Bart and I, she is a true higher ed leader.
Yeah.
With that said, here's our conversation with Dr. Carey. Dr. Carey, because of the small conversation we had right before we hit record, I think you are ready for this first question that we have for everyone. So please let us know something that you have learned recently that you would put in the interesting or surprising category.
Well, I just learned that Gen Z and Gen Alpha might not like some of my emojis that I like to use, the thumbs up and the smiley face and the red heart. So I didn't realize that, and then got a whole list of all the emojis that I maybe shouldn't be sending out in text messages or email messages. So that was quite surprising. I didn't know that.
I think it's funny because that's part of a presentation that I made recently, and I was shocked too, but my kids tell me, "Oh, Dad, you're old, that's okay, we forgive you." And so I'm like, oh, well, that's not any better, guys, so thank you.
The other thing I found out is that you need to use a lot of exclamation points with millennials, that if you don't use exclamation points, that they feel like you're not very excited or enthusiastic or positive. And I'm old school, so I don't think we should use that many exclamation points. So anyway.
All the generations. That's wonderful.
But would love if you'd be willing to share that list. I think I need that list because I still do thumbs up, I still do smiley faces, and red heart everything. But I'm going to take the spotlight off me and put it back on you, Dr. Carey. And we wanted to talk about a few topics, one being turnaround leadership in higher ed. So if you would, take us back a little bit to when you first stepped onto the campus of Friends University. What were the most pressing challenges you encountered?
Well, we actually had many challenges, and financial challenges being some of the most pressing issues that we faced at the time. We'd been losing money in our operating budget for many years and really didn't have much in cash reserves. So it was becoming a little bit dire financially, but also had an identity issue. Who are we as a Christian university? Friends University has kind of lost its way in our Christian mission. And so trying to reclaim that Christian mission and reclaim our identity. And that was another pressing issue, is certainly for the Board of Trustees, and one of the reasons why they decided to bring me on as president to be the champion of our Christian mission.
That's great. And I know that sometimes when that happens, because I've met with a lot of Christian college and university presidents, and it's always interesting because you walk into a culture that's a little bit different, and you have to start moving and strategizing and do things that are going to be helpful but not top of the cart in any ways. And so talk about how maybe the strategies that you utilize to stabilize and revitalize that in the midst of all that, because I think building trust is the beginning where it has to happen.
Yes, building trust is difficult in a situation like that because you have to make tough decisions, related to the finances, and you don't have a lot of time typically to get to know people, to build that trust. But I think one of the things that I strive to do was to do what I said I would do.
Yeah.
And that is to be transparent and say, I don't know exactly how we got here, but we're here, and we have to make these changes to move forward as a university, to thrive as a university, and that is my goal. And I hope you'll follow me in this process. But it's difficult to build the trust early on. That takes some time, for sure. I remember one community meeting where a faculty member came up after we had talked about some of the difficulties and the changes, and he said, well, I don't know if I agree with all the decisions you're making, but at least someone's making them. Yeah. And for a while, they were in kind of a stuck mode, just not moving forward, not sure what to do. And oftentimes in these turnarounds, the people who are at the institution, wonderful people, highly educated people, but they don't have a path forward. And so it requires someone else to come in and say, here's the path. I think this is the path. Let's get on this and move forward.
Yeah, I think that's one thing is, and I'm just kind of, for our listeners, it doesn't matter whether you're a president or a director of a marketing team or, whatever it is, you've got a role as a leader. And I think sometimes as a leader, the most efficient thing that you can do is do what you say and say what you do. Because, those are the things that I think, Amy, you're kind of pointing out, is that's where trust gets built. Because so many times people live in dysfunction or toxic or whatever it is, they just get used to it. And when somebody actually comes in and makes that change, they really appreciate it, even though sometimes it's difficult and hard. And I think that being able to do that, as well as being able to cast a fresh vision and saying, this is where we're going, and being clear about that. So let's talk about that for a second. How did you start casting that fresh vision, especially when it relates to mission drift? Because I think whether it's a faith-based institution like Friends, or whether you're a STEM-based institution and you've drifted from that, so many times in our world right now is everybody's just kind of not knowing who they are. Branding is not clear. It's lukewarm, or it's not that. But how do you cast that vision and then kind of keep it from drifting further?
Well, I did quite a bit of listening when I first came to Friends University to understand our DNA, who we are as an institution, and how could we weave in our past, our values, our faith distinctives. So how could we weave all of that into our vision forward? And I think, there's wonderful aspects of the Society of Friends and the Quakers that we could draw from, and to bring that all together early on. And we got some help from a local marketing firm. We put together our RISE values: respect, inclusion, service, and excellence. And that resonated well with our faculty and staff. And it also were words that kind of filtered all throughout the history of Friends University. So as we looked at our history, these were words that kept coming up. And so I think that was one thing that we were able to work together and anchor ourselves towards the RISE values. But that's not necessarily focused specifically on the Christian mission. Those RISE values could fit at a number of different institutions. So being clear about our Christian identity, and I just would speak about this over and over again, was part of our journey. And my view at the beginning, and still is to invite people into this journey with us. It's an invitation.
Yeah.
You don't have to be here at Friends University or many other institutions. If there's something about our Christian identity that you don't resonate with, but being clear about that, I think has been very, very important. We don't want to bait and switch where people come like, oh, I didn't think you were really that type of a Christian university, or I didn't realize I would take Bible courses. We've got to be clear about who we are and what we stand for, and then invite people into that journey. And I think that posture was well received.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, in all transparency, Kaler Solutions has done some partnering with Friends University, and I think that's one thing that we've talked about, is just that idea of some of the most successful institutions right now are those who identify, articulate who they are, and they stick with that. And there's a broad, in faith-based, there's a broad tent, and there's a lot of different places underneath that tent. But as long as you can identify and articulate that, you're going to draw those mission fit students who also agree with that and want a part of that. And so I think that's really wise. Are there any moments or milestones that really stand out as turning points in your time there at Friends that you feel like that was a decision that we made that really created some momentum?
Well, obviously getting into the black, when we were able to balance our budget, it took a few years, but that was a big moment. We got some really nice 7-figure plus gifts early on in my tenure, and that was directed specifically toward our Christian mission. And so to have some people, donors, alumni, stand with us and say, we are with you in your mission, and we want this to continue and to go forward. That was a wonderful moment to share with our faculty and staff that there are people standing with us financially. And so those big gifts were really helpful. And then just recently, last few years, we've had some wonderful chapel times and big groups coming to chapel. So we had a read out chapel and over 500 faculty, staff, and students there. And, when I first came to Friends, we didn't even have chapel. Chapel had been discontinued. So to see us go from nothing to just a really vibrant chapel program has been exciting.
That is exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Dr. Carey, as you described the revitalization and then making sure you're sustaining that Christian mission, would like for you to maybe detail what you have done or what you see the way of taking that heritage, that mission, and creating it so it resonates with today's students and their families.
Well, I think we're fortunate as Society of Friends, the Quakers, as we're known, to have a wonderful history to lean into as abolitionists, as people that have been very inclusive. We see everyone as made in the image of God. And that's a big part of our DNA and who we are here at Friends University. And I think that does resonate well with our students. We're very diverse as a university, 47% ethnically diverse. About half of our students receive a Pell Grant. We're an emerging Hispanic serving institution, although we don't know where that's going to land here in the future. But socioeconomically. And then, of course, we have students that have a faith background and those who don't. And we've been able to all come together and, for the most part, enjoy being together. And so it's exciting to see that civility can happen, and we can work together even though we come from very different backgrounds, and I think that's a big part of our history as Quakers, and so we really lean into that even today.
I like that, and I want to take a little bit of what you said there and just kind of maybe go back to some of our earlier discussion that we had, because I'm curious about, as we kind of frame it now through that heritage lens, where do you think some of those things happened as far as the drift? What were the signs? Like if you were to give another school, the example of where you came in where you had to kind of recalibrate to that mission fit. What are some of those early signs that leaders or marketers need to look out for that maybe they can course correct before it gets too far down the road that it's difficult?
Well, I think these are very difficult things to identify because it's slow and it's little slips here and there, and it's not significant sometime, Now, obviously, someone discontinuing chapel, moving chapel off campus, there was an evening kind of Vespers that was still continued. But, I mean, that's an obvious move away from some of the traditional activities that happened, here at Friends University. But I think some of the other things are very small, and it's hard to tell.
Right.
And, in many respects, it is related to presidential leadership. I think that's where so much of this happens, or it doesn't happen. And I think boards have to be attentive to how the presidents are leading, the ways in which that they're fostering and encouraging the Christian mission, or maybe just not celebrating it or promoting it at the level that might be needed in these times, particularly. The other thing I think is interesting, and we were talking about this, like what were those activities years ago that in terms of Christian mission that were happening that maybe aren't happening today? And I'm not sure that there was much that was happening at that time, but you had a culture that was primarily Christian. I mean, so many people went to church. It was just a routine, and it wasn't, everyone was mostly on board with that. And now we're in a different time and a different culture. And so you maybe have to do more and be a little bit more proactive to keep the mission front and center. I don't know, but I think as I'm looking at the history of Friends, I'm not sure in terms of campus ministry activities and all the things that we are doing today, that was happening years ago, and somehow we lost our way there. I think there's a lot of shifts culturally as well.
I think you bring up some really good points, and I think that we've seen, even just in the last 5 years, there's been a big decade. There's been a lot of shifts in the culture, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. So I'm not going to get into that right now, but it has happened, and I have seen a lot of the schools that have decided this is who we are succeed because they're defining a lane there. But I think that it's difficult sometimes for that to be articulated well with marketing, and sometimes it feels abstract. And I think that that's one of the challenges that we're bringing, that I try to bring personally to my work, is how do we do that? How do we turn these practical elements of differentiators, especially when it gets into the abstract, how do we turn that into things that matter for students, parents, and donors, especially when students, parents, and donors are looking for outcomes, they're looking for these different things that can be a little bit vague and doesn't always have to fit underneath an mission umbrella. But maybe just talk a little bit about that. How are you leading that, because that marketing has to reflect that so that somebody stops and pays attention and says, oh, I think I want that. That's what I'm looking for. Talk a little bit about how do you practically embed these things?
Well, and I think in some ways it's sharing stories of activities and events and ways in which students are engaging with faith in a variety of settings. So it's not just in the campus ministry setting, but in classroom and in athletics with FCA, all of the various ways that students are engaging with their faith. And I think that it can be, where you have a few stories and there's a pocket here that's involved in faith and a little group over there, but it's not systemic throughout the university. And so that's harder to, I think, describe at times, like how is this manifesting throughout the activities of the university. So we try to highlight, our spiritual life assistance, the Bible studies in the residence hall, Sunday nights at 9, which is all student-led, and to the extent that we can offer up what is really organic with the students rather than here's what the administration or the campus ministry team has put together. And so I think those kinds of stories and good descriptions, but there's also just that feeling of, this is a Christian university. This is a place where Christ is lifted up, and that can be very difficult to differentiate from other institutions, but particularly because so many institutions would say that. So I think that is a challenge, and to use words that are different and refreshing. I mean, sometimes I see things, and we're building servant leaders, and we're and that's great. I mean, we all want that, but can we be a little bit more descriptive? What does that look like specifically? Get a little bit more into how do we do that, and what does that look like?
I like that, and I like the fact that you pointed out kind of those stories, the authentic stories, especially the student stories, are the ones that are going to make a difference. And I constantly tell people that people make decisions on looking at a school or inquiring about a school based on emotions first. Then they follow everything up with logic and the facts. But we have to use those emotional stories. And I love the fact that you talked about using that authentic student perspective, because it's too easy for us just to programmatically look at something and just say, oh, this is what we're doing, and just list it out as a transaction, as opposed to really those impact stories that those students have that make it unique. And I think one of the things I've always been impressed with you all there at Friends is that you do have that rich heritage that you can lean into from the Friends Society and the Quaker background to be able to really point to the differentiators that hey, this is who we are, this is what we've always been, and this is the fresh way that we're embodying that today. So I really, really appreciate that for all of you.
If we would like to now talk about the persona-driven marketing that you're doing at the institution and what's next. And as you have highlighted before, Friends has invested in understanding the audiences and mission fit students and the families more deeply. How has that shaped your marketing and your enrollment strategy?
That was interesting when we did the work to identify the different personas, and as I was, reading about each different persona, so much of what we talk about is if we can give them, more scholarship dollars. It's all about the bottom line, the dollars. But when you hear the stories of those different personas, it's not so much about the money. It's about motivation and interest and what would be captivating to them. And so I think that's really helpful for us as we think about our different audiences who we're speaking to in our marketing efforts.
So tell us a little bit about how you're using these personas. You've obviously done some work and looked at that. How are you using those to kind of strengthen your efforts in enrollment and recruiting? Because I know it's one thing to have the personas, but actually then deploying them to use them. Tell us about what that looks like.
Yes, this is helpful for us in personalizing our messages to different audiences. And so as we're rewriting all of our emails that go out to students. So all of the emails have been reviewed, and many are being rewritten to speak to the different audiences, to speak to these different personas, and to make sure that we're including some of their interests and motivation and the language that we've been privileged to get as a part of our rebranding efforts. So all of this together is helping us reshape our messaging and to personalize it with our different audience groups. And we just had a big meeting with all of our enrollment team to make sure they're aware of the personas and how to communicate with our prospective students.
Well, Amy, another thing that I know that I'm really proud of the team, because again, I was told everybody that we've done some work together. One of the things that we were able to do with the personas was actually to train ChatGPT on those different personas where you could actually talk with the personas, which I found very interesting. Once we had those personas, we actually could engage with that. How's your team leveraging that, and what did you think about that when you saw that?
Well, it's pretty cool, and it's kind of beyond me. I'm learning about all things AI as fast as I can, but it's really fascinating, and I think it's fascinating to our team. We've got a lot of younger team members in enrollment and marketing, and they've engaged with those AI personas and had conversations. And so I think we're just at the tip of it, and it's exciting to see what we'll do and how we'll use that in the future.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating just to be able to think about all the different tools that are available now, and being able to have these like mini focus groups, even with these different AI agents, to be able to do that. So I think that's fascinating. But even looking ahead, when we think about, whether it's generative AI or whether it's just other opportunities coming down, what do you think is going to be like for opportunities for institutions like Friends in the next decade or so? I mean, certainly the enrollment cliff is here. There's challenges in the way that we're going to be doing our enrollment marketing, but where do you see some of those opportunities?
Well, I believe in the future, and with demographic cliff coming, that it's going to be challenging, but there will be winners and losers in the future here as we look at different ways to recruit students. And one of the things that I think may be helpful for a place like Friends University is we have a middle lane in Christian higher education, and sometimes that's difficult because we're either too Christian for some folks or not Christian enough for others. But right. I think the middle lane that we occupy is a lane that more and more students are looking for. And so that way you can come and live out your faith here at Friends University, but you're also going to bump up against people that have different views, different perspectives, and in that way, really in the kind of real world right. Experience. So I think that that's attractive, and we want to continue to occupy that space very well, and to expand on that opportunity to share our unique identity. It's our vision right now to be the preferred Christian university in the region, and we have different ways that we're strategizing to do that. But I think there won't be, one thing that will really help right. Institutions in the future. It's going to be, hitting on a number of areas over and over again, and doing that well to be able to be successful and thrive in the future.
I think that's really good. And before we close, I just wanted to pull that out in the sense that at the very beginning of the conversation, Dr. Carey talked about the idea that mission drift happens with little small decisions here and there that just kind of add up. It's the same way going the other way, that it's the little decisions that you do that are the right decisions moving forward that's going to rebuild things and make things successful for you in the future. So really like kind of closing that loop on everything. So it's been a really good conversation.
Well, and we have a record incoming class this year, and the second highest enrollment in what we think ever. And people say, well, how did you do that? And I think it's 10 years of lots of strategies that we've put in place, kept working on these various strategies. And so it's, if anybody's looking for that silver bullet, we all know in higher education, it's just not there.
No.
And there will be opportunities, and we've seen here in this region, a number of schools have discontinued their music programs. And every time they do, I say, okay, great, come to Friends University, because we're going to be we are already the regional leader in the fine arts, but taking advantage of those opportunities, even in some areas where it might be that other schools aren't able to make that work and be successful, but I think we have that history and we can do it.
Yeah, that's great. Grow where you're planted. That's perfect.
So, Dr. Carey, what would be one piece of advice that you would offer higher ed leaders trying to balance a turnaround with sustaining their institution's mission?
Well, my advice is that the mission always wins, and you've got to stay focused on the mission. There's a little book by Todd Bolsinger, and it's The Mission Always Wins, and it's talking about how there's all these competing values. It can't always be a win-win, but the mission is paramount to your university. And so I think staying focused on that is necessary, even though you're dealing with financial challenges. And so, we were trying to do two things at the same time, but the mission was the most important. We had to get that right.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. And everyone, we've been talking to Dr. Amy Carey, President at Friends University. Dr. Carey, what is the best way for someone to get in touch with you if they would like to do so?
You can do that right through the front page on our website, and there's a way to contact me, president at friends.edu. And so go to our website, and you can reach me there or contact me by email.
Great.
Again, thank you for everything that you were able to convey to us today about turnaround leadership.
Yeah.
Well,
Bart.
thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a pleasure, Dr. Carey, to have you, and thanks for the conversation. I think just a couple things I want to point out to our listeners is just the importance of the small decisions you make every day. Whether that is a cultural decision, the way that you're engaging with your team, the way that you are doing different things, the way, or they are the small decisions that's either going to enhance your mission or cause your mission to drift. So you've got to pay attention to the details. I think it's real easy sometimes for us to kind of think big picture, but those details that are day in, day out, the disciplines, the things that we do on a daily basis really do impact our institutions in the long term. And so pay attention to those for both the good and the bad. And I think that's going to be a big thing. And I also just love some of the practical things that Dr. Carey talked about today, with just being able to, engage with whether it's personas or whether really understanding where you fit on, whether you're in faith-based education, what lane you're in, and being able to own that lane and be able to articulate that well. I think that's one of the things that I really, really appreciated about today's conversation. So again, thank you so much for the conversation, the time today, and it's just been a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And to our audience, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Higher Ed Marketer. If you found this conversation helpful, be sure to share it with a colleague and follow us on LinkedIn at The Higher Ed Marketer. The podcast is brought to you by Kaler Solutions, your trusted partner in higher ed branding, enrollment strategy, and mission fit marketing. Again, we hope to see you next week with another wonderful conversation.
The Higher Ed Marketer podcast is proud to be a part of the Higher Ed Marketer Podcast Network. Discover even more conversations, resources, and tools to help you grow your institution at thehigheredmarketer.com, your go-to community for all things higher ed marketing and leadership.